Hello, 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 and welcome to The Hash, the daily show where we discuss the latest and greatest in crypto news and culture. And my, Naomi, I am getting to look at your background right now. But welcome, I'm Benjamin Powers. We got Naomi Brockwell, Adam Levine, Jen Sanasie, and David Morris joining us today. And Jen and Naomi, I believe y'all are beaming in from the hot and humid Miami.
We sure are. It's been a wild ride so far. Jen, you loving it?
So much. I've been waiting for this heat.
Absolutely. Well, I'm gonna start things then.
Take it away.
Some interesting things. Like you'd think that at a conference, then the price would be pumping right now, but if you're thinking that, you probably didn't factor in Elon Musk. Now, he actually tweeted out #Bitcoin, picture of a broken heart, and the next thing you know, the Bitcoin price plummets. It's lost 5.53% as of this morning. Looks like it's kind of steadied out around there. And it's kind of interesting seeing one person have such an incredible impact on the price of Bitcoin. There are some other memes that followed. We can talk about that. But I'm going to throw this to the group to start off with. What are your thoughts on being able to literally just do a hashtag, an emoji, and it affects the entire market of Bitcoin? Ben, I'll throw to you first.
I mean, oh gosh, I've been following the intermittent thunderstorms that are just pouring in Miami, and this feels like it's just even adding to it in a lot of different ways. I think it still shows, for better or for worse, and I have thoughts on that, just the influence that Musk has over these markets. I think the forms of communication here are fascinating. We talk about memes all the time and kind of the meme economy and things like that. And this is just showing that traffic in memes and how they can impact these prices is alive and well. I would say it feels like a final word, like if it's actually a breakup, but I have a sense that this is not going to be the final word for Musk on Bitcoin, and we should certainly expect more in the future. But David, I want to toss this to you to get your thoughts.
Yeah, sure. So I think that my main thought here is to just remember the historical context, and history obviously is a loose term, but just go back to February. I looked it up, and on the day that Tesla announced it was putting Bitcoin on its balance sheet, the Bitcoin price was almost exactly what it is right now after Musk's sort of ambiguous tweets. And so I just think it's important to keep in mind that yes, this is a weird bummer, but he also helped push it up in the first place. So on some level, we're kind of evening out. And then, of course, the second really obvious observation is that, this level of influence goes against everything that cryptocurrency supposedly stood for, but it also kind of reflects the fact that when you have so much influence by sentiment, it's maybe a vulnerability sometimes. So those are my two thoughts.
Yeah, I'll jump in there and just ask, what do we think that the tweet means? Because he's a cryptic guy. He's just posting memes and emojis, and everyone's trying to decipher them. It's, a Taylor Swift album release day or something. And
we know what you do when Taylor Swift
exactly. Yeah, same with Elon tweets. I'm they're deciphering everything. Because it is interesting. It does come off the back of him responding to a tweet. I guess it was about a month ago now, where someone responded and said, these maxis are going to be slapping themselves in the face when they find out that after all of the, all of the crap that they've given Elon, that, he turns around and then sells all of Tesla's Bitcoin. And his response was indeed. And now we have this breakup message about Bitcoin. I'm just I'm going to throw this to you, Adam. What's your thought here? What's going on?
Cryptocurrencies and leaderless systems in general have some interesting traits about them. One of which is that because they have no leader, it's very easy for someone to kind of jump out in front of the parade and act like they're leading, right? Some people believe them. But the reality of it is that this course that we're on is really kind of irrespective of Elon. And he's just sort of the most visible noise that we see out there, which then when we see the price do things, but the price does things all the time, irrespective of what's happening, we then kind of ascribe those to him. This is not a new phenomenon for Bitcoin. Bitcoin has had this actually quite a lot. It used to be core developers who did this sort of thing, right? Not jumped out and posted memes, about breaking up with Bitcoin or going to the moon or whatever, but just trying to dictate direction. And it's something that works as long as you're kind of in line with what's going to happen anyways. But to the degree that, that you try and make it about yourself, well, it's not really about you. And again, like just drawing this attention kind of makes that more apparent. So my suspicion here is that we will see this continue to happen until the kind of returns for Elon diminish. And then at that point, he'll probably switch his focus to something else. It's not about Bitcoin. It's about Elon.
Yeah, and to be clear, when you talk about returns, the returns are to his ego.
Yes, to his ego, very much.
I just on the thought of Elon being a figurehead for this community. I mean, haven't we all kind of propped him up and played our part in creating this this kind
Not
of
me.
Not Ben, it's true. Not Ben. But we've all played our part in propping Elon up, and then we're surprised when things like this happen. Ben, I actually did want to ask you, I know you've been following the SEC Elon tweet story very closely. Do you think maybe this has something to do with that, or are these two things very completely separate?
No, I think those are separate cases. There were reports yesterday, I believe, from the Wall Street Journal that the SEC sort of admonished Musk for some tweets last summer saying like Tesla's stock price was too high. And that comes, off the back previously of an SEC settlement where, again, I'll iterate, like Elon Musk is supposed to have a Twitter babysitter. And I am not sure that is happening. In regards to like Bitcoin in particular, I don't think there's going to be any sort of similar controversies there. This is not something he is in control of. This is like a decentralized system that can't be, kind of accused of manipulating stock prices or anything like that, for example. So it's kind of like a square peg round hole situation, but I do want to note that the SEC has checked him still yet again for his tweets around, some of Tesla stock prices.
I feel like the tweets are so weird at this stage that he probably just has like a GPT-3.
The SEC is just like, what is happening?
It's like auto-generating things at this stage.
I would love to speak to the person at the SEC who's in charge of monitoring Elon's Twitter account. Like, what a job.
Yeah, wow. I mean, the thing about these tweets, though, is that like when you're looking at what he's talking about things that the SEC doesn't regulate. The things he's gotten in trouble with the SEC for is for commenting on areas where he has privileged access as a result of his role at Tesla and kind of the weight that people put on his opinions about that. This is just fun. This is just him messing around, and just like it's an easy flex.
All right. Well, speaking of fun. Coinbase has made Dogecoin available to retail investors. So this comes days after the cryptocurrency was made available to pro users, and there's a giveaway. So they're giving $1.2 million worth of Doge away in promos to get those retail investors excited if they weren't already excited enough about Dogecoin. Ben, I'm just throwing it straight to you. Let's start off with the contest because we have it up here on the screen. What do you think?
I mean, I in separate instances, I've been covering kind of like giveaways and giveaways gone wrong and poorly. So I'm like, these things like concern me just off the top. Like there's certainly a way to like attract retail investors. That being said, whereas we previously discussed that Doge might have value for traders and people who are like looking really closely at these price spikes and fluctuations and kind of moving assets around to just get those gains, that might have some use case here. Just sort of airdropping 1.2 million Dogecoins to retail investors is something that just doesn't sit quite right with me. You're like pulling people into an ecosystem where we've talked kind of ad nauseum about like this being funny money, and not sort of like the asset parking place that you might want to say, for example, as like a hedge against inflation or like, get higher returns or something like that. So I think it's just setting up to be really messy, particularly, as we have Elon on the flip side of this really pumping Doge previously. So those are my initial thoughts. But yeah, it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, let's say this is a disappointed but not surprised situation. I mean, Coinbase has always been, I don't think hated is too strong of a word by Bitcoiners. And, this kind of just continues that legacy of, and the other point is to pay attention to is they're a publicly traded company now. And on that front, they're not doing great. Their stock has declined steadily since the IPO, and they actually now, this is not something that people necessarily are familiar with, but they actually have a legal responsibility to pursue profit as a publicly traded company. And if Dogecoin is the thing that people are talking about, that's what they're going to do. And, so principles, technology, none of that stuff is really part of the Coinbase mindset in general, and it certainly is not now that they're public.
Adam, jump in.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's kind of like Coinbase. So I don't think Coinbase is hated by the Bitcoin community. I think Coinbase is kind of viewed as an avatar of like the kind of centralized, very accessible, but it comes at a compromise to sort of the principles that underpin sort of the value behind cryptocurrency. So I would just temper that statement with that little bit of nuance, David. To the kind of broader point here, I have to echo what Ben said. I really feel like Coinbase is like, well, this is the first time that we've now, messed around with this crypto thing. So why not do a giveaway, right? Like, this is an industry that is notorious for having people do these like fake giveaways. And if you look at like the big influencers out there, like your, Vitalik Buterins of the world, they usually have in their, Twitter handle, not giving away ETH or whatever, because this is a real problem that really seems like it's been hard to solve. It's in the comments everywhere. It's in Twitter everywhere. And so when you see examples like this, on the one hand, it's like, all right, well, I guess that's, a good marketing mechanism. And on the other hand, it's like, man, we're really training people to fall for these things. Ben, where are you on this?
No, I think that's such a good point, Adam, because when you see these sorts of practices like done by both scammers and legitimate entities, like it makes it really hard to differentiate between the two of them. And so we see fake Coinbase accounts pop up all the time on Twitter, right? And like we even saw when Elon Musk got hacked, his Twitter account, and it was talking about BTC like giveaways and stuff like that. And so, using that language and continuing to pursue this as a practice in the industry, like I get it as a marketing mechanism, but you're setting up people to fail in a lot of ways and make them vulnerable because you're legitimizing and using the same language that scammers are. So.
Yeah, so I think that Doge, it's very clear that people want it. Last night in line, I had to buy some US dollars from someone, and they wouldn't accept Monero, they wouldn't accept Dash, they wouldn't accept Bitcoin
Oh my
Cash,
God.
but they went. Doge was like, okay, that's how I'm getting my US dollars tonight. So but let's take a quick break here.
And that's at the Bitcoin conference.
Yeah, at the Bitcoin conference. We're going to talk about Grand Theft Auto and crypto. What is going on there? We'll give you details after the break. Stay tuned.
So, before I got into the world of cryptocurrency, I kind of made my bones in games journalism. And one of the biggest games franchises out there, one of my favorites for a long time, since the very early days, is Grand Theft Auto. Grand Theft Auto has a new version coming out probably in the next couple of years. I don't actually think it's even been officially announced yet. But yesterday, a well-qualified leaker, that's a leaker who's been right about a lot of stuff before, basically said on Twitter that Grand Theft Auto, the new version, would include certain payments in Bitcoin. He later clarified that he means that in cryptocurrency as an in-game item that is not actually convertible. But again, for me, this is kind of all part of that journey that we're on. From, crypto being this kind of weird, obscure thing to being something that's so mainstream, it's even kind of just recognized in things like Grand Theft Auto. Who wants this one first here? David, you want to go?
Adam, can you just clarify one thing? So is it not actually Bitcoin? It's just an in-game crypto?
Not actually Bitcoin. It's an in-game crypto. It's just another form of in-game currency that isn't going to ever hit a blockchain or whatever. The point is that from like a cultural touchstone basis, we are now talking about cryptocurrency as this form of money that can now appear inside of very popular games like Grand Theft Auto.
Yeah, and I guess my first thing would be to, Adam, you probably are more on top of it than I am, but I don't think people quite appreciate how big GTA is, because the current version has an online multiplayer that has in-app purchases and all kinds of stuff. Last time I looked, it was still one of the top 10 revenue games on Steam. So, I mean, it is huge. It's one of the biggest games in the world. But I'm curious because, 2 years of development is a long time. Do people think there's a chance that in that time, the infrastructure for, NFTs or whatever would develop to a point where maybe they will flip the switch and make this something actually connected to a blockchain? Because we already have games that are integrated with blockchain. At least they're not super popular, but they're out there. So I'm curious whether that might turn from being just in-game to something else.
Yeah, I think we've talked about that on the show before. And Adam, you brought up a great point about, this conflict between what consumers want and what the gaming companies want. Like, it's in the gaming companies' best interest to not allow you to take it outside of games, to silo everything so you have to buy things within the game. The consumers may start demanding things that are, cross-platform, that are interchangeable, that you can use on various different platforms. So if that demand comes to fruition, I think we'll definitely start to see this tipping point and people actually using cryptocurrency as they're meant to be. And just as a note about the Bitcoin crypto mistake, it's a funny mistake, but it's a funny mistake to be happening in 2021. Like, that's the sort of thing that you would do, 5-10 years ago. Back in the day, it was synonymous. Bitcoin was synonymous with crypto, right? You could say I'm really into Bitcoin. You'd mean crypto, but there was only Bitcoin, right? And then a few got added, but you'd still use Bitcoin as kind of this synonymous umbrella term. So it's interesting that 2021, when you have so many cryptocurrencies out there, they're still making that error. But Adam, I'll throw this back to you.
Yeah, go ahead, Ben.
Sorry,
no,
man.
I was just going to say, I'll take it back one step further too, where crypto used to just mean cryptography and not even cryptocurrency. Right. So these things are shifting all the time. I don't really see GTA, David, to your point, moving into NFTs, for example. I think that, the blockchain-based video games that are getting spun up and are continuing to get spun up, are doing that from the get-go, and they're really orienting their sort of brand and the games themselves around having that interoperability. I think it'd be a much heavier lift for a company in a hugely centralized company like the makers of GTA to start trying to plug that in on the back end at this point, and then introduce users to it. So user demand may ultimately be what decides this, but I would be incredibly surprised if we did see that at least in the near future. But Adam, to you.
Yeah, when you're looking at a company like Activision, which is, I believe it's Activision, whoever it is who actually publishes Grand Theft Auto, this is a money printing machine for them. Yeah, Take-Two is the publisher. This is a money printing machine for them. It's just the reality of it. They have a formula that was very innovative 20 years ago. But today, they're just doing iterations on it and figuring out how to pump out more and more and more money from it. Grand Theft Auto 5, the prior version, came out 8 years ago, and it is still incredibly profitable for them because of the way they've done this. So yeah, my expectation echoes what Ben said, which is that they're not going to do anything first. They're going to do something because they have to, maybe, but probably they're just going to use this to print money, and they're just, drafting off kind of the zeitgeist as it kind of comes up. Jen, where are you on this?
Well, just off the back of what Ben was saying, I have a question for you as our resident gaming expert. I am definitely not a gamer. But to me, when I hear about all of this, I would think that users would be demanding NFTs, and they would be demanding a crypto that they can use off platform. And so from a user standpoint, do you think that this is what we're going to see in the future? And is that going to put kind of GTA behind?
Ben?
No, I don't think so. I think this is sort of Adam, maybe to your point, this is trying to turn a monetary battleship in some ways. And, I think that people are going to have an appetite for centralization. They're going to have an appetite for decentralization, but I think there are opportunities that are popping up in the decentralized space, and that this is going to be really hard to draw this community, and this community in particular, to a different space, just because it is so not homogenous. That's not the wrong word, but Adam, to your point, it's such a tight-knit group.
Yeah, and just one more thing that I would say is that, to Naomi's earlier point, we think about this as if it's been obvious for a long time, but again, we're still early in that cycle. So anyways, now let's talk about something a little bit more serious. Ben, you've been tracking a Supreme Court case. Tell us about it.
Yeah, from the Court of Public Opinion to the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court yesterday released a ton of different decisions that were really interesting. But one that caught my eye, is that they released and overturned a precedent on the case of Van Buren and clarified a notoriously ambiguous meaning of exceeding authorized access in Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. Now, this is a federal computer crime law that's been misused to prosecute beneficial and important online activity, whether that be security researchers, whether that be investigative journalists, or others. Now, this case is really interesting because it came up as a result of an FBI sting against a police officer in Georgia who the FBI essentially paid $6,000 to sort of under the table run a license plate through a license plate identifier database that the officer had access to. So the idea of what authorized access is really at the heart of this case. And so the idea being that this officer, because he had access to this database, is not in violation of the CFAA just by using it for something that is in itself perhaps unauthorized. So there's a lot of interesting angles to this, but I do think it's really important because it narrows the idea of what authorized access is. It means that, for example, if I'm a white hat hacker, a platform or a company can't come after me just because I'm finding bugs on their system that I have access to the system. And so there's so much to unpack here. But Adam, I'm getting a little quickly into the weeds. Zoom us out a little bit about what the larger implications are.
Yeah, absolutely, Ben. I agree with you. This case caught my eye a couple of days ago or whenever it actually came out. I lose track of time these days. And kind of the big thing about it is that we have a lot of laws in this country, and there are a lot of ways that a prosecutor can choose to go after a particular crime. In this case, they sort of overstepped. And the overstep is illustrative of kind of the larger problem of this, which is that, for example, if you work for a company and your company gives you a phone or a laptop and you're not explicitly authorized to, for example, check your personal email on it, then the CFA, the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, could be used by your employer to actually charge you with a crime. And it's not like a minor crime either. It's a very serious crime. So in the context of this particular case, the officer definitely was doing something wrong, but the way that they charged him was using kind of the wrong tool in the toolkit. And that's what the Supreme Court really said here, is that this particular statute can't be used just for anything. You should use something else to go after illegal behavior that doesn't specifically implicate this. David?
So I'd like to draw a weird parallel too, which is we have had in the last couple of weeks a lot of ransomware attacks, or recent months, I guess, big rise in ransomware attacks. And so some people are doing things like calling for banning crypto to stop ransomware attacks. And I think this is very similar in the sense that you're not really attacking the crime that was committed. You're attacking like the method of the crime. So the case that I think really kicked off the discussion about this in the public, just to give some context, if you go back to 2011, there was a guy named Aaron Swartz who was a internet freedom activist, I guess you could say. And what Swartz did was he had access, he had legal access, he had been given access to a database called JSTOR that contains academic research. And academic research databases are very expensive. You can pay like $50 for a single paper. It's frankly unethical, and I say that as a person who's formerly an academic. But what Swartz did was he mass downloaded things. He used a script to pull things from that database, and I believe he was at least planning on uploading them to the cloud, so that would have been more of a clear crime. But MIT and others went after him for the downloading itself, even though he had access to the database. So this, frankly, vindicates him. Unfortunately, he committed suicide in 2013, basically because of the prosecution, which is just this heinous tragedy. And everybody involved in that prosecution should not be allowed to live it down for the rest of their lives. But this is another example of why this is an important decision.
Yeah, and I think it's really important. What I think, and obviously we talked about this law enforcement officer doing something wrong, and it's so fascinating to me that like that case is what brought this to the Supreme Court and is setting this precedent. And this is also why like I'm always really interested in court decisions, right? Like they have a ton of different ripple effects when these precedents get set that like narrow certain laws that can be used as cudgels by companies when, people perform actions that might not make them look bad, right? Like for an example of this, if I was a investigative journalist, well, I am a journalist, but if I was like a social science researcher, for example, and went onto Facebook, looked at their housing ads, plugged that into a testing mechanism I have to see whether it was potentially discriminatory or not, Facebook could potentially try and like come after me using the CFAA prior, saying like, hey, no, you're not using this like we intended it to be used. And they could lay out in their terms of service that I was not able to do that, and therefore I was kind of running amok of the CFAA. And so those are the like sort of ripple effects that are happening here, and I think are going to be really interesting to follow, but also why like this is incredibly important, right? Like particularly when we're thinking about crypto and decentralized things and even centralized exchanges, like security research is so important because all of this tech generally has bugs that can be exploited. And again, like that can happen to the tune of like millions and millions of dollars that people are losing or just being, taken away. And so I think that the security research process is so important, and this is going to be a really important precedent that we can examine going forward.
One quick comment. The Facebook thing is really a great point because, for example, just to give a quick shout out, there's an organization called The Markup that is currently using something called Citizen Browser to gather information about how Facebook's algorithm works. And if this decision had gone a different way, work like that could have been rendered legally problematic. And of course, understanding how Facebook works is hugely important to all of our lives and, saving the planet from that mistake.
Yeah, no,
it's just
absolutely.
nice to see a law this overturned so that, it's nice to see a law that is being weaponized in the wrong way to target specific people because perhaps they're political dissidents or perhaps they say something you don't like or whatever. And now the Supreme Court is pushing back on that. It's just really nice to see that sort of evening out.
Yeah, and so taking this a bit of a different direction, speaking of revenge, David, I believe you wanted to talk about revenge spending post-pandemic today.
Right. So there was a little bit of a trend on Twitter this morning that I don't like. It's a dumb phrase, frankly, but they're talking about people coming out of the pandemic and engaging in revenge spending, which just it doesn't mean anything like what it sounds like, which is, I hate it.
Okay.
But it is a real thing. The pandemic is ending, and people have very high savings and very low debt levels. And obviously have also been cooped up for a while, so people are going out spending a ton of money. This matters for a lot of reasons. Obviously, it's nice to see a recovery happening. There was a lot of anxiety a year and a half ago just about the broader economy. But I think it is also important in the light of sort of the broader economic policy that led to this, which was a lot of relief spending, a lot of debt spending by the government along sort of Keynesian lines, right? You have a recession and you spend a lot of money to try and pick up slack in the economy. And what this really reflects, I think, is more broadly just the sense that appears in this case to have worked, or at least it looks like it for now, to have kind of gotten the economy started a lot faster than it was after, for example, the 2008 financial crisis. Not a perfect comparison, but an interesting one. And so I think there's a lot to be said about what this means for Bitcoin, but I think it's just a big story in general is we have this recovery happening that seems to maybe, at least to some people, be a vindication of Keynesian deficit spending during a recession.
In there and push back on that idea that there's anything good about Keynes. What we're going to see now is probably the opposite of that. Maybe people are trying to pitch this in a nice way, but we've seen velocity of money at incredible lows ever since the start of 2020. All of this stimulus spending, all this debt creation that you mentioned, David, that stuff hasn't worked its way into the economy yet. And once people go out and start spending it, that's when we're going to be seeing this hyperinflation begin. Last night, and it's just kind of this general consensus, and just chatting to like regulators as well and different people in the industry. People are thinking that the US is at the end of its cycle in terms of the US being the predominant, global currency, and they think it may even happen sooner. You're just really going to see this steady decline. This may be the catalyst that creates it. Unprecedented amounts of government money creation out there. And then you've got, $6 trillion budgets in the works and all of this. So all of this is going to come to a fore. And I think you're right. People are going out into the economy. They are going to start spending this now. But that's when things are really going to have to start to ramp up. And because we've already hit the tipping point of debt to GDP ratio, the government's kind of backed itself into a corner. They can't start raising, short-term interest rate, because they won't be able to pay off their debt, because all of the GDP is just going towards servicing that debt. And so, if things start heating up in the economy, what recourse is left to them? It's kind of a scary situation, and really speaks to why a lot of people are going into gold right now, why a lot of people are going to cryptocurrency, even Dogecoin. People are thinking that may even be a better place for their money than the US dollar. That's a crazy, crazy idea to me, but that's the mindset of people right now. They're looking for places to put their money because cash just does not seem like a safe bet right now. But Adam, throw this to you.
So, I mean, Naomi, I echo largely everything you said. I think we have a tweet actually that really does a good job of encapsulating this that I kind of want to break down for us. Okay, we got it up there. So Luke Groman, who's a popular podcaster on the kind of macroeconomic side, said the clearest indication that we are going to have a highly inflationary outcome, and non-transitory inflation at that, is the number of people on financial Twitter that think using electricity to create a hard store of value like BTC is a waste of time. So this is a little bit complicated, but what it means basically is that the Fed has won. Is that monetary policy, as far as the Fed is concerned, as far as all of the people in the kind of, financial world who matter, right? Not the kind of, outlaws that you see in kind of the Bitcoin side of things who believe in sort of a different kind of set of monetary fundamentals is what we're seeing. But all of the people who get any sort of attention paid to them all agree that nothing bad is going to happen if the Fed continues along this incredible monetary experiment of spending more and more money. It's not just the Fed. We say the Fed because the Fed is part of the responsible party, but really it's kind of the Treasury and then the legislature as well. The incredible amounts of money we're talking about here, and the just lackadaisical attitude to the potential repercussions that will come as a result of it, basically mandate that we are going to get the worst possible outcome, because there's nobody saying anything that would make the Fed, the Treasury, or the legislature change course. They're going to do exactly what they want, and unfortunately the predictable outcome of that is not going to be what they think it is. Jen?
I just want to say that for anyone who's still having a hard time understanding what we're talking about, Naomi shared a really hilarious video on her Twitter account I want to say a few weeks ago that explained this concept and why everyone is so interested in Dogecoin. I forget the comedian who made that video, Naomi, but I just urge anyone who's having a hard time understanding this to go check it out. It explains it in a lighthearted way because it's such a gloomy topic.
Yeah, I'll give a really quick summary of that. It was from Remy, who does a lot of music parody videos, and it's basically saying, like, they're printing so much money right now. It's like, basically, take this $1 bill and go make Xerox, you know? So because there is so much money being created, it just, you know, you have the same demand, the value just goes down. It's just laws of supply and demand. And so people really are just, like, they're even looking at Dogecoin as a place to store their value. Because dog money. Check it out if you wanted to have a good laugh and sing along. But I think, Ben, were you about to jump in?
Oh, yeah, I had some thoughts, but I don't know if we have time for me to fit them all in. I just think that, you know, this conversation should be situated in the fact that, like, people did desperately need this money, particularly in the US too. And simultaneously, the federal government has been, like, whittling away at, like, you know, corporate taxes and things like that I think could help offset some of these things. So it needs to be situated in a larger conversation where these things are not binary and there's a lot of other variables that are impacting this. So I just want to toss that out there, but I totally understand and appreciate, you know, how these larger forces are driving this conversation for sure. But Naomi, take us home from Miami.
Take us home. Actually, I think that we're wrapping that up there. So guys, thank you for joining us. We're going to go and enjoy the Miami beaches.
Enjoy your palace.
You want to see the roof? It's kind of nice. It's a very interesting place. So, thank you so much for watching the Happy Back Monday. Thank you guys for joining me today. Adam, David, Jen, Ben, it's awesome having you. And we'll see you later on today on CoinDesk TV, 3 p.m. Christine Lee for All About Bitcoin. Check you later.
See ya.
Bye.
Take care.